There's a myth going around. We have enough food in the world, and hunger is a thing of the past. Well, certainly here in the city, we have a plentiful food supply. We just have to go to the grocery store, right? While this might be your experience with food, in many developing countries, hunger is still a big problem. In fact, hunger is still the #1 cause of death in the world, far greater than diseases like HIV or heart disease. In terms of the future, there are many factors that threaten our global food security. Your children and my children will have to deal with challenges like climate change, rapidly evolving pests and diseases, our reliance on chemical fertilizers, and, I would add, the misinformation on the safety of genetically modified foods. But keep in mind, while we're trying to deal with these challenges to protect our own food supply, the world's still growing. And by 2050, we will need to have to produce an extra 60 to 80% more food to feed an estimated 10 billion people on this planet. Speaking of food, I've got some fresh vegetables here with me today. Does anyone like broccoli? Are there any broccoli fans? Oh, there's a broccoli fan. Any broccoli fans? Oh, there's one at the back. Another broccoli fan in here incoming. And I've got some Brussels sprouts. Who doesn't like a Brussels sprout with a bit of melted butter? Delicious. Brussels sprout fans. Over here, over there. Everyone gets a Brussels sprout. Oh, look, there's a few more here. There we go. Now, I want to let you in on a little secret. Shh. All of these plants that I've been dishing out to you all, and you can see on screen, they all come from the same plant. Humans created these healthy vegetables. Through plant breeding, they selected for traits like buds to create Brussels sprouts or stems to create broccoli. They don't exist in the wild. Mind blow, right? So, plant breeding works. It just takes a long time to perform the many generations of crossbreeding and selection that's needed to develop genetically stable plants incorporating all the necessary traits. And so it can take up to 15 years using traditional approaches to develop and improve crop variety. So if a new pathogen was to come along that threatened the global supply of a particular grain, it could take more than a decade to develop and identify resistant breeds, grow the replacement crops, and feed the world. And if we continue on this slow pace, we only have 2 or 3 breeding cycles to develop the improved crops with higher yields, better drought tolerance, heat tolerance that are needed to meet the 2050 challenge of feeding 10 billion people. I guess the real challenge is we need to double the rate of genetic improvement of our crops that are capable of producing this extra food. So, to help speed up the process, we developed a technology called speed breeding. More than 10 years ago, my colleagues were inspired by NASA-funded research who were aiming to grow wheat in outer space. The scientists were exposing the plants to 22 or 24 hours of light and controlled temperatures. And this extra light triggers the reproductive phase, and the plants produce seed much faster than normal. And you're looking right now at a picture of wheat growing on the International Space Station. We thought this could be a pretty cool tool to help speed up our crop research and breeding on planet Earth. Well, when we first proposed the idea, people actually thought we were crazy. People said, "Oh, you can't do that. That won't work." Well, we decided to give it a go anyway. And you know what? It worked. Over the years, we slowly refined the speed breeding technology and now use it routinely for all of our crop breeding and research. By exposing the plants to 22 or 24 hours of light and controlled temperatures, we can grow up to 6 generations of wheat per year, instead of just one in the field. So it provides a very powerful tool for crop improvement. Once the superior plants have rapidly been developed in the speed breeding system, they still have to be tested in the field for yield and quality before a farmer can grow them. To highlight just how fast the speed breeding plants grow, our collaborators captured this time lapse. On the left, you can see wheat growing under speed breeding conditions, and on the right, you can see the wheat plants growing under normal glasshouse conditions. And you can see just how fast the speed breeding plants grow. They've already flowered, now they're producing grain, approaching maturity and harvest, while the normal conditions are much, much slower. We've also demonstrated that speed breeding works for a bunch of other crops, like barley, chickpea, canola, and even the hipster food, quinoa. To enable widespread adoption of this enabling tool, we published our protocols earlier this year in collaboration with scientists from the University of Sydney and the John Innes Centre in the UK. But what does this mean for the future? Well, disappointingly, time travel is yet to be invented. So instead, I'd like to pretend to teleport you all through time to give you an example of how this technology could help farmers in developing countries and how speed breeding, among other technologies, could help shape the future of farming. But before we travel into the future, let's first travel back in time to the year 2016. Destination, Bangladesh. Meet farmer Rahim, who's a fictional farmer, although these events really did happen to many farmers at the time. After planting his crop of wheat in 2016, Rahim travelled to the south of the country to visit his family. He could hardly wait to return home to inspect his crop. There'd been good rains, and the farming community were really hopeful of good yields this year. But approaching his farm, Rahim noticed that the crop was not as green as he was anticipating. It was far too early in the season for the crop to start maturing. Upon closer inspection, he noticed that the spikes of wheat were white in colour, as though they'd lost all the green chlorophyll. Rahim had never seen anything like this before, but he knew it wasn't a good sign. His neighbours' crops were also affected, and nobody knew what was causing the problem. So they decided to call the local agricultural department. An official came out, inspected the crops, took some samples, ran some lab tests, and they discovered that the problem was in fact a new disease called blast. Until now, the devastating blast disease had only been reported in South America, but somehow in this global interconnected world in which we live, the fungus was introduced into Bangladesh. Rahim and the other farmers were advised to burn their wheat fields to contain the deadly fungus. Rahim was devastated. After losing his crop, his income, he immediately thought, how was he going to support and feed his family? He could only think and hope that a new wheat variety would be available to grow next year that's resistant. However, in reality, all the local varieties in Bangladesh were susceptible to blast disease, meaning that plant breeders had to go back to ancient varieties stored in seed banks and hunt for effective resistance genes, which then had to be crossbred into the local varieties. This process can take decades. Speed breeding technology can help fast-track the development of resistant varieties for farmers like Rahim. Here in developed countries like Australia, we also need more robust and productive crops, not for survival like in the case of Rahim, but to maintain sustainability and profits for our farmers. And let's not forget that many developed countries also contribute significantly to global food security by exporting and supplying food all around the world. So, let's fire up that teleporter again, and now let me transport you all to the future, to the year 2050. Destination? Goondiwindi, southwestern Queensland, Australia. Meet Farmer Tim. Tim is a fourth-generation wheat farmer who just inherited his family's property. Although farming's changed a lot in the past 30 years. Excitingly, Tim just purchased seed of the latest wheat varieties, which he plants using his tractor fitted with the latest technology. Its programs include a digital map of Tim's farm, including soil type and yields attained over the past 10 years. Tim's tractor is guided by GPS and switches planting between 3 different wheat varieties depending on the soil type. The 3 wheat varieties have customized root systems that enable the crop to access more water from the soil. And so Tim can literally get more crop per drop of rain. And the new wheat varieties are also nutrient efficient. They require only half the chemical fertilizers that we use today. As the crop approaches the critical flowering stage, Tim receives a notification on his iPhone, version 26. The monitoring drone detected a disease in one of the paddocks while Tim was having a shower. Tim swipes through his management options and instructs the sprayer drone to go take care of the problem. The drone knows every inch of Tim's farm and flies directly to the paddock with a disease outbreak. But instead of applying the traditional fungicide to the crop, the drone applies RNA molecules that disable the pathogen's ability to produce spores and spread throughout the rest of the crop. So instead of spending 8 hours spraying his crop, Tim goes to the football with his mates. Tim's crop of wheat is now mature, and you guessed it, it's harvest time. But the grain is not like the grain we've been growing the past hundreds and thousands of years. The grain's genetically engineered to be more nutritious and contain 4 times as much resistant starch. Tim sells his grain to major food companies around the world and receives a premium price for the nutrient-rich grain produced using green and sustainable technology. Tim's pretty happy he decided to take over the family farm. He loves the lifestyle using new technology, and most of all, he loves making money. Well, that's the story of Farmer Tim at Goondiwindi in 2050. But how do we get there? It almost sounds like something from a science fiction series on Netflix, right? But in reality, we already have many of the technologies that we need to develop and manage Tim's crop of wheat in the future. Speed breeding can help, but it's just one tool in the shed available to the modern plant breeder. And we need all the tools if we're going to meet the 2050 challenge, including biotechnology. If you want less pesticides used in your food production, I encourage you to rethink what you know about genetically modified foods. We need tools like genetic engineering to deliver traits like drought tolerance, disease resistance, and even healthier food products. Consumers, like you and me, we want clean, green, and healthy food, right? Well, the scientific community around the world are striving towards reducing chemical inputs like fertilizers, pesticides, fungicides, and biotechnology can help achieve those goals. So why can't biotechnology and organic farming coexist? Why can't we have a GM organic system? They're trying to achieve the same things. When we think about food production, we think about farms, right? But the future of food production is also changing. There's an increasing preference for locally grown food in cities, and indoor farms are capable of producing greens all year round, just like the venture of Elon Musk's brother, Kimball Musk, who started a vertical farm in Brooklyn. There might be applications for speed breeding technology to help boost productivity of these indoor farming systems. Currently, energy is a major constraint, but innovations in renewable energies and lighting technologies could change the game and dramatically reduce the costs. So, Can we feed 10 billion people? Well, advances in breeding technologies provide new opportunities to speed up the development of better crops. However, the full impact of these technologies will only come if they're successfully integrated into crop improvement programs and there's consumer acceptance of biotechnology. So let's continue to embrace science and think out of the box when it comes to crop improvement and producing our food. Let's empower plant breeders in developing countries to develop more robust crops for farmers like Rahim. And finally, let's make the story of Farmer Tim a reality. Thank you.